Hello, I'm Robert Wilkins, host for Citizens in Profile, which has been added to the Auburn's Voice production library with Citizens Minutes, Be Informed, Citizens Brief. Now I want to introduce our Citizen in Profile, John Sophocleus. Hey, John.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, I'm excited. It seems like we've done this before.
Yeah, deja vu all over.
Deja vu, that's it. So we won't tell the audience what happened. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, I know you were in Maryland, went to school there first, and then you went to Clemson, and then you went to Auburn.
Correct.
And of course came to Auburn in '92.
Yes.
And we've been blessed to have you since '92. That's
Some
a lot
might
of
call
years.
it a blessing.
So, but I wanted to ask something because you deal with economics.
Indeed.
And because of that, I felt like I needed an expert. And I want to know about wealth distribution.
And redistribution.
And redistribution. Probably more redistribution.
Indeed.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
sir.
but let me know.
Well, I mean, I started out at Ford Motor Company as a warranty and policy administrator. I didn't know we chewed some of the same dirt. I haven't heard anybody recall what a AmeriCorps is in a long time.
Yeah, those were pretty cool cars.
And
weren't
cool
they?
cars. So I made enough money to take my vow of poverty and teach.
Good.
And so that's given me a lot of freedom. Probably my best known publication is about how much we devote to redistributing wealth in the economy. And the more empirical one found that we spend about 22-23% of GDP purely redistributing wealth in the economy, picking winners and losers. And of course, that could have been devoted to productive activity.
Can you give me a couple of examples?
One of the best or longest in the tradition of the American economy is disuniform tariffs, picking winners and losers. If you want to go there, we can talk about corporate welfare. That was probably, in U.S. history, the first instance of very strong corporate welfare.
Okay.
Putting a disproportionately high tariff on one thing that you didn't want to compete with. And of course, we could talk all the way down to the city of Auburn, where you put in subsidies and incentives and all that to redistribute wealth from some of your long-time existing tax base to bring in folks that sometimes end up running out and harming the folks who have given you and built what you now enjoy in a city like Auburn.
Well, to me, wealth was something that I always talked with my mother about when I was younger. And I said, Mom, I'm going to be a millionaire. And she says, well, do you know what that is? I said, yes, Mom, I know how many dollars that is. So, and she said, okay, we went over it. And then she said, well, what are you going to do with that? And I said, I'm going to make enough money to help people and change the way things go. And I said, I've learned in my short period, I was like 13 years old.
Wow.
And I said, but I know that if I had the money, then I could do things like the Rockefellers and the Fords, like you work for,
Sure.
all those people that, and they contributed a lot, but it took them a little while,
Well, and $1 million back then was a much more lofty goal than, the modern days of Bidens and Trumps. But what I like to listen to what you're saying is, right, to be able to actually do and help folks. What most folks don't understand is don't do a whole bunch of harm getting to that $1 million.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
if you do it, earning it productively, then you won't be doing harm when you amass that sort of wealth to try and shepherd things in a righteous manner.
Yeah, because it's not how you, like you just said, it's how you do it. If you do it correctly, if you gather lots of wealth, it's great. But if you gather it in a way that is not good for the people surrounding you, yes. I guess I'm paraphrasing what you just said.
But good paraphrasing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, so.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of folks that cannot appreciate, we call good businessmen today often what were just good parasites that benefit from wealth redistributions instead of going out and earning, their wealth through some sort of competitive market process. And Auburn, I think, is a great example of where they do everything they can to thwart competitive outcomes.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, even the idea of the factories we have, but it's not just in Auburn; it's everywhere.
Absolutely.
They're vying for that competition, but in the process, they don't buy for the people who are the real base. Because if you got a large corporation and they leave, but they, once they left, it's just like it devastated the area. Because of that, it's just not a good thing. So if we bring in factories, we need to bring in people that want to be a part of our city, from the 3 employer, 5 employers, 7,
Sure.
10, or whatever it might be. And they should get the same benefits, or we shouldn't have benefits for any. And that's part of the problem. We talk about wealth distribution. Well, if you give them the incentives and you don't give it to the average person, then you've gone the wrong direction.
And you've distorted the result, which tends to be more battered when the economy contracts. When you see times downturns, right? I mean, talk about the big one recently in 2009, right? The ones that weren't able to weather the storm. And I mean, talk about another instance of where something was triggered purely out of corporate welfare. We would not have suffered what we suffered in 2009. And of course, there were some politicians. I mean, you and I have chatted at times about the Fed and all that. I mean, Ron Paul was talking about that looming event for years before it happened. And then, once it happened, why was anybody surprised if you understood the distortion that generated that?
Yeah, I remember hearing him give some speeches on that. And it was tough to listen to, because it was like, is that really happening? Is it really something that affects us? And it was, and it has, and it's
Sure.
been since then.
Well, and I mean, you've always been one of those that are willing to speak the truth and illuminate things that most folks don't want light shown upon. And I don't know whether you want the conversation to go in that direction or not, but CARES ARPA money has just been a huge distortion for Lee County, Auburn, Opelika. I mean, we've spent $12 million on a highway engineering department complex instead of the money going to the churches that were forced to close, small businesses that suffered from the contraction. Well, I mean, just another instance like you were talking about. They don't seem to care about the productive, citizens that go to church, run their small businesses. They're more interested in redistributing wealth to their cronies.
Well, what's happened over the last, I guess, 80 years in Auburn is you had the first administration type system where you had mayor and council. Then in 1980, you went from council to city manager. And in the process, the people in between the council have not learned anything. They don't understand their responsibilities.
You bet.
Because we citizens vote for them. They come and say, we're going to do the best for the city, but when it goes down to it, it's the best for whoever, but it's not the city. It's not the citizen. And citizens, to me, are first. They've always been first, but we sometimes don't push hard enough.
And I think citizens have become, it's easier to ignore them now. When I first came to Auburn in '92, I want to say it was 30 some odd in population. Mm-hmm. Right, currently it's pressing 80 some odd thousand?
Close to 85.
And you still have the same number of council persons. All that does is concentrate more and more power into a fewer group of people that are easier to manipulate. And I mean, how many times have you been to a city council meeting to watch them go in lockstep, or have one person with the courage to say, "Wait, this is wrong"?
I've not been to too many.
Okay.
I've just been to 90 over the last 5 years.
Just 90?
Just 90. I just feel like that I missed those few I should have gone to.
Oh my gosh. Well, and kindred spirits, right? When I go to a county commission meeting, I've witnessed more county commission meetings than any single person that's on the other side of the dais. And what I think makes you a more formidable person to speak with and engage is you actually have witnessed what's going on, know who the players are. I mean, you have to go to maybe a dozen before you really start to see who the players are and what's the wealth redistribution in play tonight, mm-hmm. or many of them often.
Yeah. Well, something they can do. They don't have to be there. They can just get online, and they've got it, or they can listen to it on the radio and live.
Oh my God!
So I mean, they have all the choices, and they can go whenever they want. Because it can be live, you can watch it, or if you say, I can't do it today on Tuesday, because it's, first and third Tuesday, then they can just do it when they go to bed or something, turn it on TV instead of watching a movie that they've seen 8 times. They can watch a council meeting they've seen for the first time.
There you go.
You know?
What does John Rice like to pick on? Dancing with the Stars, right?
Yeah,
I mean, is that really going to improve your quality of life? I mean, outside of a little bit of entertainment at the moment. And of course, that's exactly what they want to have, Robert. They don't want informed citizenry. And the more and more, I mean, with this show and your other efforts, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a dozen other of you that would show up for citizen comments and let them know, hey, you're being watched. And here's an election coming up, whether you're talking about, you know, city council or county commission or whatever, all of a sudden they get worried once, you know, an election starts looming in the next few months. Wouldn't it be nice if they were more worried about that every day of the year?
I agree. I think every day of the year is pretty important. It's kind of like I went to one of the council one of the board meetings. It was for public records. The Parks and Recreation. Sorry, couldn't remember. And in that, I went to 6 straight meetings, and out of that, one person didn't show up for 3 out of the 6.
And wasn't removed.
And 2 other people showed up once or twice. No, sorry, 2 didn't show up for 2 of them. The rest of them didn't show up for 1 of them. And I was like, and my feeling is, when I used to head nonprofit groups and stuff, I told them, if you're going to donate your time, like I dealt a lot with high school kids and so forth with Hugh O'Brien Youth Foundation. And what I said was, if you're going to donate that time, you better commit.
Amen.
Just as though it's a job. Because those kids depended on you. If you decide it's something lax, please don't join our group.
And what you're saying speaks volumes about who put them on that board. And does anybody ever go back to them and say, hey, this person you champion doesn't even show? And there'd be a little bit of accountability at least.
Well, like the mayor, he'll say how wonderful they are. I just don't think he knows all 120 that are picked between the 22 boards and the 1 commission. But I may be wrong. Maybe he knows them all. But
well, given their objective, it probably is seen as good for them. I mean, the person who's on the planning commission that I've followed the most, right, was found for $500,000 in malice, and you know, is still at Auburn University. Why is that person still at the university, much less on a board or a commission? But that's what they want.
Well, also, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. I want to know the effect that inflation has, not the normal thing that we think about, but who does it benefit? We always look at who it destroys. It's us. You know, it's we that make a normal living and out there trying to pay our bills, and then all of a sudden we go to the grocery store and it's 10%, 15, 20% higher.
You bet.
And you're like, wait a minute, I've got to pay, instead of $300 this month, I got to pay, you know, $400. And but let me know who does benefit.
Well, I mean, and great question, and we've talked in the past that you understand how they change buzzwords, right? Let's talk about a balance sheet instead of the money supply. So the short and quick answer at the time T, the first time that it's spent, is it benefits the spender, which is going to be the government, the first time that it goes out there before the economy realizes that those green and white slips of paper have been devalued once again. The classic that economists like to talk about is anybody who's holding debt, right, likes inflation because they get to pay it back with cheaper dollars. Well, does that ring a bell? Aren't we at like 40 trillion or something in debt? So, I mean, you get that double whammy. I mean, back in the, and of course, this most recent bout of huge inflation was when Nixon closed the gold window. And that's when a word, or a bunch of words came along, the inflation tax. But the big one was bracket creep. It's not some guy standing behind doing creepy faces or whatever, right? You basically were pushing folks into higher marginal tax rates because of inflation. And lo and behold, they never adjust the brackets to, you know, coincide with how inflation has increased. Folks who can hold hedges against inflation, right? Dirt and buildings, right? I mean, Auburn has certainly kept up, if not outpaced, with inflation. But there are, you know, other places that you're just not going to see that ability to keep up with, you know, how many more green and white slips of paper required to purchase the same thing.
Correct. Yeah, to me, inflation. I want to know if it's why it's bad to have deflation. Is that a bad thing to have when things have gone up high? Seem like they ought to go down, but they don't go down. They just don't go down as much because every year that I can remember, there was pretty much inflation.
Correct.
They would say 1.5 is acceptable. I'm not sure why that's acceptable.
Amen. Right, and if we followed the Constitution, we'd have stable money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would see that sine function, right? When prices started to get too high, they would be adjusted. Yeah. And I'm not going to be too harsh here, but whenever I hear somebody use the word deflation, I want to scream.
Okay.
Does anybody think that you will ever see one green and white slip of paper ever again buy 1/44 of an ounce of gold, or FDR 1/35 of an ounce of gold, or before FDR's devaluation 1/20 of an ounce of gold? So you will never see deflation in our economy again. Now I think the word that you were hunting for is disinflation.
Okay.
And it absolutely would be nice to see some disinflation and things go back into check, or at least back towards check. And I mean, you've already answered the question with respect to why are we targeting inflation at 2%? Why don't we have stable currency and not, tax savers and folks who can't protect themselves from inflation?
Well, I mean, like when the chicken prices or the egg prices went up. I mean, it went up because of getting rid of what chickens?
Some of that was the bird flu.
Oh, that's right, it was.
And that's what economists call an exogenous shock, right? And so
well, I know they killed millions, but that was because
I
of
think it's because of
bird
that.
flu.
Right. So holding the demand curve constant, right? When you reduce supply, then of course the price is going to go up until supply can, adjust accordingly. And I know that folks that don't like somebody saying this, but if the price of eggs goes up, you start to test how much you want or don't want something, right? So if somebody's willing to pay $5 a dozen for eggs, cheerio, I'm going to look for substitutes or alternatives until it adjusts back down. And we don't like market forces driving stuff. Our U.S. economy now is a command economy. And so many things are distorted by government policies, programs, subsidies, tax breaks, eminent domain abuse. You can go right down the litany of things.
Well, I was in farming, and I didn't like the support that they gave farmers all the time, even though it's a total need. But we allowed, the problem with farming was that we allowed South American commodities to come in. We allowed a lot of things when we should have kind of controlled a little bit of that. But instead, we just throw money. We lose billions, so we just give billions.
So not only have I been, clobbered for wanting to have stable money, the big one when I was a newly minted economist were things like NAFTA and GATT. Patently unconstitutional, right? Imagine if you had a uniform tariff, then you wouldn't be picking winners and losers, and that stuff that would be coming in I won't say all of it, a bunch of it would not be coming in if they actually had to pay. Now, the nice thing about a tariff is economists like to call it as a user fee. Who pays a tariff? Those who buy and sell imported goods. Well, this is where to provide and maintain a navy, dockyard maintenance and construction, coin money, right, property rights to ideas and inventions and all that. If the federal government did those few things it's actually authorized to do really well, those who benefit from the exchange are the ones who pay the tax. Now, to market economists, that's the dream. That's to not have things distorted by ridiculously high or low tariffs, right?
Correct. Well, one concern I've always had since a kid was the Federal Reserve. I just think it's...
You were a strange kid.
Yeah, I know I was. And I love numbers. When I went to college, I took 4 courses of calculus as electives.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so I am a little strange. At the same time, I don't know the English language as well as I would like. But you give me numbers, I love them.
Go to your strength.
Yeah,
I got it.
It's kind of like looking at this. It says popular. I noticed you picked that out the other day. Popular annual financial report. But when I looked at it, I was like, this is not the report that I've got through the internet, but it's a good one. They do it for beauty, but I was like,
Shiny, glitzy, yeah, production.
but when I looked at it, I was like, well, $113 million revenue in 21. By 2025, it's 167.
Think it outpaced inflation, Mr. Federal Reserve?
Yeah. And then I said, well, we had a lot of people that came in. So I said, well, let me look and see how much. I looked at it, 9.5%. This
Not even close to 40 some odd percent.
Yeah, this presents 44.4%. So I'm like, 9.5 minus 44. So we got roughly 34% more income over the last 5 years than we had the needs of those folks. Do we have other things that we may have done? Yeah, but are we spending it wisely? Are we involving the citizens?
Yes, sir.
Does the citizens have really anything to say, or does the management team pretty much say, here it is, leave it or take it, but
Auburn gets fed with a whole bunch of things that are just patently unconstitutional. The big one that feeds it is the occupational tax.
Yep.
So, you've got Auburn, Opelika, they collect from people in rural areas that have no representation, right? Direct taxation without representation is wrong. I actually asked the legislature, and they pre-filed a bill that say, okay, folks who are paying that occupational tax that can't vote for the folks collecting it, I can write that off of my Alabama state tax return. And then the legislature can decide to give it to Auburn or whoever they want to, and then I've got my representation. And when that thing got pre-filed, you can imagine that legislature got descended upon like nobody's business, right? Because there's a whole bunch of money in play. Part of Auburn's problem is it's got money to spend that it really wouldn't otherwise have to spend if it was in their coffers, honestly.
correct.
And you've already talked about Parks and Rec, right? Didn't you have a city manager who came out of Parks and Rec who didn't know poop from Shinola, however you want to say that? And the same thing happened in the county, right? Twice they put the Parks and Rec on a general election ballot, and it was shot down, right? The folks in the county didn't want that. So what did Judge English and his thugs do? Oh, let's put it on a special election, not announce it, don't let anybody know that it's going on. All their Politburo minions go, and it magically passes. So, part of what goes on in Lee County in general is the ballot is so, controlled, so uncompetitive, it's got one of the lowest turnout results in the state.
Yeah, I noticed the last election in the city, we had one of our wards. Now, you divide them by, got 8 wards to divide 85, so it's about 10,000 a ward.
Yeah.
And we had a total of, the person won 216 votes. Not a difference, total.
Total 200.
And was about, I think it was about 65 or 70% of the votes. So can you imagine? We have got to do some work.
Amen.
People have got to start looking at our situation. We are so gifted with money. We're so gifted with talent, and we need to utilize them. And it is easy. I can imagine any of you or you, if you had more money every year coming into your coffer, and you're paying your bills, is that hard to manage? Pretty easily.
Well, it's pretty easy, but then it ends up back to the redistribution game.
Correct.
And you're absolutely right. I know some incredibly talented people, not just in the econ department, but across the county, certainly most of them at Auburn University. That is not what the Politburo wants, right? They want a corrupt dean on the planning and zoning commission and all that other sort of stuff. They want folks that are tied into, stealing from students via a whole bunch of monopolization games, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the meal plan, whether it's the bookstore, pick your poison. And that's what they consider good business.
Well, good business is where everybody shares in it.
Good business is driven by profits, not wealth transfers.
Yep.
And how many people do you know can really make the distinction between a profit generated in a market result and a wealth redistribution that's generated under some, crony capitalism, corporate welfare game?
Well, I just think everyone has a right to take their talent and utilize it. And if that's in a monetary basis, they should be able to do it. They shouldn't be hindered by other people who are bleeding the system through their benefits, through their who they know, what they can provide for somebody as a payoff, whatever it is. I don't,
We're
but
tracking.
yeah, but it's not a good thing for any community. And Auburn has so much in general. Very good place. A lot of people love living here,
Mm-hmm.
but they are tired of the buildings downtown being built, and when those buildings should have been built on the campus, but obviously something went on there, whatever it was, and then you go out. I've done like 17,000 deliveries for Uber Eats.
Wow.
Okay, and in those deliveries, I see all the developments.
You know the town.
I go to I go to the factories. I feed them. I feed the world in a way,
At least the Auburn world.
Yeah, the Auburn world. But when I go out, I'll go to these places and they clear cut everything. They forget why we're all here. It's because we love the trees, we love the people, like here, I'm I'm a mile from campus, and I have birds singing, as you can tell.
Yep.
A pretty loud one there. So, but it's what we all want, and it's not that difficult. But greed.
Correction,
Yeah.
not all,
Yeah.
right? The folks that are getting the wealth redistributions do not want that,
Yeah.
and they've made that clear.
I guess wealth distribution really is greed. Is that what that is?
Well, greed is certainly a part of it, right? I mean, when somebody's out there trying to gain a profit in a competitive situation, no worries there.
Right.
But when they're using that greed to funnel, wealth that they otherwise wouldn't get in their direction, that's the problem.
One thing is important is truth and honesty and integrity.
Amen.
And I believe all three of them with you. I've never seen you in the few years that I've known you not to be that way. And
Appreciate that.
It's great to do that. And I think people need to know about all of us and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish.
And find kindred spirits. It's been a
Mhm.
pleasure meeting you and seeing,
Thank you.
what you're trying to illuminate with Auburn City. God bless you. There's very few people who would do the heavy lifting to, once again, I keep saying illuminate,
Yeah.
but shine light on things that they don't want light shown upon.
Well, we're hoping a lot of people out there will, try to run for council, mayor, or whatever they want to run for, and so that we have competition. Competition's always great.
Amen.
Well, I appreciate your time. Is there anything that you would like to add to our discussion?
Well, a little bird told me that somebody might be running for office.
I hear that bird.
You hear that bird. So if you don't want to go there, I will just simply say that I hope you know that there are a whole bunch of folks out there that appreciate you putting the time and effort in. And as you know, my word is illumination. You're going and shining light where they don't want it shown. And that's very important. The other thing that, I've appreciated the more I get to know you is you've got an analytical, systematized way of thinking about stuff. And economists like to stress this thing called the structure, conduct, performance model, right? And, my example, I like to talk about basketball, right? The shot clock or the three-point line, right? It changed the rules that changed the way they behave, which of course changed their performance. I don't know how many people remember good old Dean Smith from UNC, right? The four-corner offense, right? And they'd get a 10-point lead, and the sound of TVs clicking off was deafening, right? It's over because he's going to play keep away. Well, no reason to play the four-corner offense with a shot clock, right? It'd be like punting on first down or something. Nobody cared about a gunner who could, shoot the eye out of the basket from downtown. But when it pays 50% more, I want those gunners. And you do a very good job at getting people to understand this is the structure that we're operating in, which is causing this behavior. And that's what's generating this distorted result. And the more you put it and couch it that way, I think the more you'll get people to appreciate what it is that you're trying to at least, ameliorate. So. you're never going to get rid of all the corruption. Let's not be naive, right?
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be nice to at least curb it?
Yeah, I agree. And something I've learned is for people like you is just getting to understand what you think and how you think. Because the more I can gather, like everyone else, we should always be hungry for knowledge. Knowledge is to me the pathway to a better world.
Amen. Well, and I absolutely, and my godson constantly tells me, you look at the world with an economist's eye, and it's true, right? I mean, and I think that you've got your perspective, and you look at it with the eye that you're accustomed to. A JD is going to look at the world more from a law perspective than an economics perspective, and some of the stuff that I see you trying to do is shepherd more people into the analysis, into the mix.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact that somebody is going to show about something that they don't like, right? Whether it's the trash debacle or the rentals or whatever, the fact that they're showing means they've thought about it and understand it enough. So don't try and curb that or snuff that input. At least learn a little bit of the perspective.
Well, it has been always a pleasure to see you, to talk to you, and you're always got something that's different. And I like that. So
Thank you again for having me on.
Thank you, John.
You bet, Robert.
Bye.